Has anyone turned up at a party lately and been dressed the same as someone else? Has anyone done that? Well, I found that this morning when Christian spoke, because Christian and I have talked a couple of times. How do you use this one? Hang on, I'll get there. I'm pressing the laser at the moment. Which one? Oh, that one. I was going backwards. Yeah, so for those of you who remember, Christian put up a slide to do with the perfect storm. It was a tornado. Well, there's my version of the perfect storm. I was thinking along the same lines, and Christian and I also share, I suppose, common techniques and a common philosophy. So I'm going to skim over a couple of my slides quite quickly. He covered the technology side and the government side. Just to say, you know, in the customer side, you think about the Japanese tsunami that's occurred, the Queensland floods, last night I had a look, 8,146 Christchurch earthquakes and aftershocks. And when you think about that whole environment, there's a guy called Patrick Whitney, and he talks about the innovation gap. And he basically says we become very proficient at technology and very proficient operationally and even with policy, but as we've become very proficient, we've become less empathetic, if you like, and understanding the customer's world, and we've been hearing about that today. So there's been this gap, this empathy gap, which has led to an insight gap, and that insight is really what fuels innovation. Once we get those insights, it really drives us forward. And the title of the presentation was on Windows of Opportunity. James has been talking about regulation shaping policy and maintaining the integrity of the system. I'll spend a little bit of time with some examples about translating that policy into administration, and that's why I invited David along, and also just, you know, administering. And that ability to stay true to the intent as you go through that transformation that Linnell was talking about earlier. And a really useful diagram that I keep using is this one here. It's called Balanced Breakthrough. We've heard a lot about technology driving us forward. We've heard a lot about business, what's viable from a business. And my background back in the telecom days, we spent a lot of time in those two spaces, and then we thought about the citizen, the customer, the user. Balanced breakthrough, and what we've heard today is you start thinking about the citizen, the customer, and the user up front, understanding what's viable for you, and then you leverage the heck out of technology. I'll skip through this one. Anyone, what springs to mind when I put that one up, apart from you wouldn't buy it? I've got one of these, but it's not like that. So, inside out. So we've heard a lot about outside in today, and you know, a lot of us wake up in the morning as the insider, as the expert, and we come to work with all the best intentions, but we don't have that outside in perspective that we've heard about so much. And we think that the user's world or the customer's world looks like this. Anyone's desk look like this? No? No one owning up to that one? Well, we go out there and we find a desk that looks like mine. You know, the volcano filing system, if you like, everything's hot around the middle. So our idea of what their reality is isn't their reality. There's also the idea of pathways and customer journeys. And Professor Dick Buchanan talks about systems being so complex that you don't actually experience them. You only experience your pathway through that system. And we think that the system looks like this. We think that people walk through our process maps, if you like, and it's all nice and straight and enlightened. And then we go out there and we find this is their reality. it's often on the cliff edge. So some quick examples. I've got a couple of ex-colleagues in the room from Inland Revenue. One of the examples was, organisations often talk about customer segmentation, and we did that. But when you think about customer segmentation, we had students, we had individuals, we had families, etc. The reality is, when you stand in that person's world, I could have had a student loan, I've started up a small business, I've got what we call KiwiSaver, etc. I'm the one person, and I've got these multiple channels coming at me, and I have this fragmented experience. The other one, to go with the road signals, is we went out to some small to medium businesses and we said, we want to help. And one of the big insights we got, a little insight, but it changed the mindset, was, would you guys just stop helping us? It's like death by 1,000 cuts. Every time we introduced a new improvement, they had to change their business system. And their business systems, things weren't working that well, but they kind of worked. So every time we tried to improve, they had to relearn, and sometimes they missed it, and they all of a sudden were not compliant. And the last one is, I want to get a voice from the room. Does anyone know what that is at the end? Any idea? Anyone got a fireplace? That's called a fire log. And that isn't really so much a fire log. We went out and we spoke to businesses, and again they said, listen, your communications is great. Every time you want to help us, you communicate, and that means you develop a new brochure or some information. We have to reinforce our letterboxes, but please send us more. This guy, this is a true story. He pointed over to his fireplace and he had these fire logs that he'd made out of the government information when he started up his business. True story. Now, what I'd like to do, just for 2 or 3 minutes, how am I up on time? Yeah? Is I'm going to hand over to David, because when I was asked to present, I thought about some examples, and I thought, well, the next example is one that's in the human services space that we worked with David and his peers on to develop, and it's in that window of translating the policy and going through the transformation, and how the heck do you keep that on track, and how the heck do you get the customer's voice into that space. So, David, I think I'll just hand straight over to you for these next 2 slides.
Thanks very much, Jim. Yes, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the work that we've done on building a methodology for creating customer journeys in human services in support of the service delivery reform agenda. And is it that one? Oh, good. So far we've prototyped this methodology with about 5 different customer groups. A new parent, a recently separated, a single mother, a male approaching retirement, a father of one, and a person experiencing homelessness. And essentially the process took 3 stages. The first part was about discovery and exploration and doing a lot of finding out. And then we moved into that synthesis and analysis stage that Christian Basson spoke about this morning, and then ended up with a mapping and a visualization. And I'll show you one of those in a minute. I'll show you, in fact, the homelessness map, which is there. It may be a little bit too small for you to read the detail there. When we've used these artifacts with business areas, project teams in human services, we've had them blown up into A0 so that people can see them properly. But just to talk about the process a little bit, that discovery stage really involved us talking to those customer groups firsthand. going out and talking to them in a location of their choice, so often their own homes, but not always, really of a place of their choosing, trying to understand what the real journey for our customers is. So not really starting from where we begin or where we think they should be at the start of an interaction with us, but actually asking them about their own experience. So we wanted to understand what their journey was, what insights we could learn from that journey, and what could we learn that we just didn't know before. Understand their emotions, clarify their goals, and understand their motivations. And the synthesis, in order to get to this visualization stage, the synthesis obviously had to start while we were collecting the data. So we'd go out, collect the data, often in teams of 2 or 3, 3 of us, and then we'd debrief in the field. And then when we came back to the office and started that sort of analysis and further synthesizing, trying to gather the data together, look for common themes, and try and create one of these visualizations, which is an aggregate of a number of different journeys. We talked to about over 30 people in all, so these maps are an aggregate of several different people's stories. For the homelessness journey in particular was very important to us because it actually provoked quite a lot of emotion in the people who collected the data, because these people had really compelling stories to tell us about their experience. And you can see, well, I hope you can see from the map that the map works on several different levels. So at the top, you've got goals, needs, feelings. Then we've got a section which is about who is part of their journey, so who else is involved. And then there is the stages of the journey that we've identified. And you can see with the homelessness story, there are several points where people end up just going round and round in circles, because they don't actually progress. There isn't a linear progression towards self-sufficiency or recovery or some other place at the end where they feel their outcomes have been met. They often get trapped, and that first circle is about the issue of housing, and the second circle is really the issue of employment. But we had some really compelling stories from people, and we didn't particularly ask them about their interactions with government. They told us about their interactions with government quite freely, and some of those stories are quite shocking in terms of the way in which government services don't align very well, don't join up at the state and federal level, and also the importance in this particular space, for example, of the not-for-profit sector. So we actually went to a homelessness organisation in Melbourne, in fact, to collect these stories from individuals, but we also spoke to workers who work with people experiencing homelessness. So that's just an example of some of the work that we're doing. We're still prototyping this work, and we're thinking about other ways of improving upon it. And in particular, what we're looking at is how we take these visualizations and make them meaningful for people who are creating things to improve experiences and outcomes for customers, and how they can apply the learning from these customers' experience to the work that they're doing.
One of the things when we talked about the windows and that massive transformation and effort that the department's doing, when we developed these, David and I used these in a number of workshops, so people who were running the projects, people who were in the network, could actually figure out were they contributing to make a difference. So that was some of the power of the use. So it wasn't just a really nice picture that's up there that people go, yeah, I understand that. It was how we used it, and that's David and I were talking earlier about, and how can we keep getting those experiences to the fore. So just wanted to